Hey, everybody, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we have 4 people in class and then the rest of you are here online. So, as you know, this week is optional with the Zooming. And next week will be face-to-face. So I expect y'all to be in class next week. It's a better learning environment. It's difficult to try to do the synchronous Zoom and write on the board and everything. So if you're all expected to be in class next Monday, unless you have extenuating circumstances, and if you do, because you had to leave the state or something, or you can't stay, you can't make it, then let me know and I'll have to approve that. But otherwise, plan on being here next Monday. So how'd you guys all make out? Any, I hope not too bad. Did any of you have really serious damage, or was it mostly just roof damage and such? Okay, well, it seems like most of the people in class, except for one of our students who's from Laplace, just had roof damage. So anyway, if you haven't taken the insurance class, the Finance 328, which I teach in the spring, that should be a really interesting class this semester, next semester. With all the new regulations and new laws that are going to come out as a result of the storm. So I was just talking to a colleague of mine before class, and I found out that the winds were like 200 miles an hour for the storm. They're trying to get, they're actually going to get it recategorized probably as a 5, because it was really stronger than a 4. Okay, so anyway, this class, what I have redone the schedule, and so let me share the screen and pull up the schedule here. Hang on a second. Okay, so this is what, so I basically just stopped after Labor Day and just went ahead and went to 9:20. So what we're going to do tonight is go over the chapter 2 and 3 homework, and then we're going to cover chapters 4 and 5. And then next week, we'll have a review for the exam, go over the chapters 4 and 5 homework and have a review for the exam. And then the first exam will be on the 4th of October. That's exam 1. And also tonight, if we have time, I'm going to go over some more details on the portfolio contest and how to set that up in Yahoo. If we run out of time, then we'll have time again on the 27th. Anyway, so here's the revised schedule. So on the 27th, chapters 4 and 5, the chapters 4 and 5 homework will be due, and we'll go over that. Then we'll have a review for the exam. And then you'll take the exam on the 4th, and then your portfolios for the contest are going to be due on the 11th of October. And so remember, that's just where you're picking the 10 stocks. You don't have to do any of the research yet, or you don't have to show me any of that research. You just, you're going to pick 10 stocks. And so that's going to be due now on the beginning of class on the 10th of October. So hopefully we'll have time to go over that tonight, if not next week. And then we'll go over chapters 8, 9, and 10. And then exam 2 is on the November 1st. And then we're going to we have a review for the final exam on the 6th of December. And then the final is going to be the 13th of December, which is Monday, December 13th. So actually, we didn't really lose any time. We're actually gaining time. That's why I kind of am letting you regroup, and I'm going at a little bit of a slower pace here, because I'm sure you haven't been thinking about this class for the past month with everything going on and probably forgot everything. I know I haven't been thinking about the class. It's kind of hard to get back in the swing of things. But with them eliminating the 2 fall breaks, and they've shortened our Thanksgiving holiday. We have to have class on the 22nd, that was the Thanksgiving holiday, and then extending the class a week. We're in good shape. So you don't have to feel like you are under pressure with this class. We've got plenty of time to complete the coursework still. So this is the renewed content. And then the drop date has been extended to November 30th. That's the new drop date now. Okay, does anyone have any questions on the new dates or anything? Okay, so that's on Moodle. All right. So here's the revised portfolio assignment with the new dates. And then here's here's obviously the homework assignments with the turn-in portals. And then here's the homework for chapters 4 and 5. And I still have to put in the dates, but these 2 are going to be due on the 27th. And then we'll have the exam after that following week. Okay, so let's take a look at the homework. Okay, and just interrupt me if you have any questions. Oh, this is chapter, let me go back to chapter 2. Okay, so chapter 2 was I think it was it 1 what was the assignment again? Was it 1, 2, 3, and 6 for chapter 2? Okay, so let's take a look at these problems. So okay, so for problem 1, it says that, hang on, let me pull up that question. All right, so a stock sells for $10 a share. And if you purchase 100 shares for $10 a share, that's $1,000. And after a year, the price goes from $10 to $17.50. So what is the percentage of return if you bought the stock on margin? And the margin requirement was 25, 50, or 75%. Ignore commissions, interest, and dividends. Okay, so you spent $1,000. The stock was at $1,750 at the end of the year. So you made $750. That's your gain on the stock. So they don't ask you this, but if you if you bought it, if you paid cash for it all, if you didn't buy it on margin at all, what is your percentage return? If you paid cash.
You get like full profit of it.
Right. So if you bought it, if you didn't buy it on margin, your percentage return is 75%, right? $750 divided by $1,000. So to figure out your percentage return, you just take what your gain is and you divide that by your purchase amount. And that's your percentage return. So if you purchase this with cash, your return is $750 divided by how much you put up, which is $1,000. So your return is 75%. Okay. So what they're asking is, they should have asked that question too, so you can compare it. So 75% if you didn't use margin at all. If you did use margin, what is your return? So when you calculate your return on margin, you don't factor in what you've borrowed at all. You're only factoring in the money that you've put up. So the margin requirement means that's how much money you have had to put up. So what is your percentage return if the margin requirement is 25%? So what that means is you only have $250 skin in the game. So if you only put up 250 and you made 750, what is your return? Well, 750 divided by 250 is 300%. So that's your answer for the first part. If you had a 25% margin requirement, your return is 300%. If you had a 50% margin requirement, meaning you put up $50, 500 of your own money, you made 750. So 750 divided by 500 is 150%. And then if you had a 75% margin requirement, you put up 750 and you made 750, you made 100%. Okay. If you didn't use margin at all, you put up 1,000 and you made 750 and you put up 1,000, that's 75%. So what is this telling you? What are you seeing? What's your takeaway? And you guys, anyone who's on Moodle can answer too. What is your takeaway with margin? What are your thoughts about buying on margin here?
It amplifies either both your profits and your losses.
Yeah. So buying on margin amplifies your profits and your losses. So I could actually, if I had $1,000 to invest, great, I'll make 75% there. But if I only had 250 to invest, and went out on margin, 25% margin, I could make 750 off of a $250 investment. So that's giving me a 3% return, 300% return. So the margin amplifies your returns. So this is the way I like to think about it, is just go with the 50%, because most of these brokerage houses, they start you off at 50%. They allow the 50% margin. So if I had $1,000 of my own money, I could, well, in this case, it's 500. So if I would invest 500 on margin, and you double your returns. So if you are 50% on margin, you can double your return, 75% versus 150%. But with that being said, it also doubles your losses. And the problem with being on margin is, like today, for example, out of the clear blue sky, I mean, maybe it wasn't out of the clear blue sky, but I wasn't really in tune to this, but I get this message late last night, like at 10 o'clock, I get some kind of email, message from CNBC saying something about the Hong Kong stock market, that the Hong Kong stock market is down like 5%, and real estate, something to do with the real estate. I didn't really even pay attention to it because it was so late. And then this morning, the futures in the US are down, and this is start of a correction. Maybe the market was down 2 to 3% today, down more at one point. So my point is, if I was on margin thinking, oh, I'm going to make all this money, and now the market's turned, I could get a margin call. If I dropped below, usually if you drop below 30% or so, they'll give you a margin call. And then you have to either put up more money or you have to sell things. And if you don't have money to put up, you end up having to sell at the least inopportune time. So it's really dangerous being out on margin. I don't recommend it unless it's a sure thing, and nothing in the stock market is a sure thing. But anyway, you can see how your returns are magnified there. Okay, so for number 2, let's look at and let me stop before I get off of number 1. Let me just give you some interesting history. So in 1929, the crash of 29, in the 1920s, the margin, guess what the margin, I may have told you guys this already. Guess what the margin requirement was in the 1920s?
Wasn't it like ridiculous? Like 10%?
Yeah, 10%. So imagine that. You only had to put up 10%. So that's why people were borrowing money like crazy and buying stocks, because you only had to put up 10%. And so that's one of the reasons why the market went up so much. And then it crashed. And finally, the banks quit lending people money and people were getting margin calls. And that's what precipitated this crash. And so that's why they don't have, one of the reasons why the margin requirement is higher. Now, like I said, it's initially 50, and then FINRA has the FINRA regulation. It's around 30% when you get a margin call, typically. So, okay, so let's look at 2. So what if we don't have a good situation here? What if there's a loss on a stock? So in this case, it's the same situation. Let's say you have cash here and you bought $1,000 worth of the stock, and it's gone down to $750. Well, if you paid cash, you're down 25%. That's not, I wouldn't be happy about that, but it's not a catastrophe. I can recoup that at some point. So if it was all cash, you just take the 250 divided by 1,000, and that's your loss. Well, let's compare that now to if you were on margin. So let's go to the 50% first. So it's going to be double. If I was on cash, I'd be down 25%. But if I was 50% on margin, 250 divided by 500, I'm down 50%. If I was 20, here's the real scary thing. If I was only 25% on margin, I've lost everything. 250 divided by 250 is 100%. So I've lost all my money. If I was 75% on margin, 250 divided by 750 is 33%. So the point of these 2 problems is just showing us that your returns and your losses are amplified if you go out on margin. Plus you're paying interest too. You're paying interest on the margin. I don't typically recommend going out on margin, but there's some instances where it might make sense to go out on margin a little bit if you want to bear the risk. And here's one instance that I have done. I typically don't go out on margin, like I said, but I did do this last year. So the market was really low, had really been beaten down because of the pandemic, right? And especially these real estate trusts, these different real estate trusts had been really beaten down, like down over 50%. Well, these real estate trusts pay a really good dividend. Okay, and so remember how to calculate the dividend yield? It's the dividend divided by the price. So your annual dividend divided by the price equals the dividend yield. If the price of a stock has gone way down, so if your denominator has gone way down, but your numerator is the same, the number is going to be higher, right? Your dividend yield is going to go up. So think about this. If you're taking a calculated risk, if you have a pretty good idea that the stock is undervalued and it's paying a really good dividend, well, if you go out on margin and you're paying 6% margin interest, but the stock is paying an 11% dividend, then it's not quite as risky to go out on margin because your dividend will cover more than cover your margin interest. Now, the stock price, of course, the stock price could go down further, and that's your risk. But sometimes if things just really, after a correction, if things just really seem to be low, undervalued rather, and you have these stocks that have a really healthy dividend yield, going out on margin a little bit I think it's okay to do that, but you just have to be careful with it. Okay, so anyway, that is what margin is. Now, you typically cannot go out on margin with an IRA account, but with a regular brokerage account, you can. Do any of you have Robinhood accounts? Can you go out on margin with a Robinhood account? Do you know?
I don't think so.
I don't, because I have one and I have never gotten any information that I could. Okay, so that's number 2. Okay, let's take a look at number 3. So with number 3 here, you purchase 100 shares of stock at $100. So you've purchased $10,000 in stock. The margin requirement is 40%. And what's the dollar and the percentage returns if you sell the stock for $112 and you bought it for cash? Okay, so if you bought it for 100, you sold it for $112. So here's your profit on the stock is $1,200. 1,200 divided by 10,000, you made 12%. Okay, what if you sold the stock for 90 and you bought it on 40% margin? All right, so you lost $1,000 here. So you would only be down 10% if you would have paid cash. But since you went out on margin, you only put up 4,000. So you lost $1,000 off of 4,000. So you lost 25%. What if you were 60%? What if the stock sold for $60, went down to $60 and you were 40% on margin? Well, if it goes down to $60, you've lost $4,000. You were 40% on margin, so you put up 4,000, you lost 4,000, so you've lost everything. That's okay. So that's 3. All right, and then was 4 assigned? No, 5, just 5, right? 6. It was just 2, 3, and 6.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. 2, 3, and 6. Okay, let me go to 6 here. Okay, so this is more short selling stuff. Okay, so let's take a look at 6. So this person owns decided that the small cap ink is overvalued at $4 and wants to sell short. Okay, so we're going from buying on margin to short selling. All right, so if I had to, well, let me ask you this: which is riskier, going out on margin or short selling, you think?
Going out on margin too short sell.
Yeah, that's the riskiest. That's pretty insane. Going out on margin to short sell is obviously the really crazy. But I would say short selling is riskier than going out on margin, because remember that the market is up 70% of the time. And so when you're short selling, you're banking on stocks going down. So it's really hard to make money short selling. You got to really be sure about a particular stock. And as you saw in this example or in this problem, your losses are infinite. Your losses are infinite. Whereas with buying on margin, your losses, the most you can lose is 100%. But if you short sell, your losses are infinite. If you short sell on margin, even worse. Okay, so anyway, let's take a look at this. So here, the price is relatively low. Short sells cannot be executed on margin. Some brokers will allow this, some don't. But So let's see. So what, okay, so the stock is at $4. What is the percentage loss if the price rises to $8? Okay, so you've lost all your money there. If you short sell at $4 and the price doubles, you've lost 100%. You've lost everything. So you could keep your position if you wanted to. You would just have to put up more money. As the stock price rises, you have to continue to put up more money until, if you're willing to do that. A lot of short selling has to do with timing. Okay, what if the stock price rises to $10? Well, it could keep going beyond $8. So you might ask yourself, well, what happens if it rises beyond my 100%? Well, if it goes to $10, you've lost 150%. And so if that happens, you're going to have your brokerage call you, your brokerage company is going to call you and they're going to tell you, hey, you never sold this. Now you're in the hole by 50%. So you're going to have to give them money to get out of that mess. So they'll require additional funds because you have a negative account balance at that point. All right, if the stock goes to zero, that's your best case scenario. You've made 100%. That's the maximum you can make when you short sell, if it goes to zero. So that's the best return. What are the maximum returns and losses? So the max return is 100% if it goes to zero. The max loss is infinite because there's no limit on how high the stock can go. Okay. And so then for E, from the short seller's perspective, what is the best and worst case scenario? Well, obviously the best case scenario is it goes to zero. The worst case scenario is it just continues to go up. And you're going to have these margin calls. Okay, does anyone have any questions on short selling or buying on margin?
So if you're short selling a stock, is it possible for you to just wait? Like if it does go up, if the price does go up, can you wait until it drops back down again? But would that require you feeding in more money?
Yeah, it would. So the question was, if the stock goes up, can you just wait till it goes down again? And yeah, you can, because it just requires you putting in more money. So like, for example, some things just seem to be no-brainers. Like when I think back through the years, Radio Shack, obvious short. J.C. Penney, J.C. Penney's I thought was a short for a long time. I'm talking like over the past 10 years. But here's what happens like with companies like that. For example, you might be shorting J.C. Penney, and for example, they got a new CEO at one point. They hired some CEO who was head of the retail. This is like going back 10 years, head of retail at Apple, to try to turn the company around. And they went up, or they might have a good earnings quarter and they went up. BlackBerry is dying the slowest death I've ever seen of any company. And during COVID, they got involved in something to do with COVID and their stock was going up. So my point is, even if you have a company that should definitely be shorted in the long run, you can have these little issues where it goes up, and it can go up from where you've purchased, and you have to put in money. But pennies, I think, I mean, like I say, I don't typically short sell stuff, but pennies probably is a good short. Case in point, my niece, my mother took my niece to get clothes for college over the weekend, and my niece is 18 years old and had never been into a penny store, didn't even know what pennies was. So that was kind of shocking to me. So that kind of sums up pennies predicament. If these kids today have no clue about pennies at all, they're probably a good short. They're not going to last too much longer. But when you go into a pennies, it's amazing how cheap the stuff is too. It's amazing they're still around. So anyway, you can think of different companies that might be a good short, and also if you think about a company that has had some meteoric rise and just seems to be overvalued, it might be a good short. Or, what a lot of traders will do, or a lot of people will do is they'll look at the levels, they'll look at the technicals. And if they think there's going to be a downturn, they'll short the market. Like if anybody's thought, could have seen this thing coming that happened today, could have made money shorting the market, because you don't have to just short individual stocks. You can short the S&P 500. You can buy an exchange traded fund. You can short the SPY, short, these funds if you want to. Okay, so anyway, but yeah, you can stay on a short as long as you want to. If it goes up, you just have to continue putting in money if you get a margin call. Right, any other questions on chapter 2? Okay, let's take a look at chapter 3. So that's a bunch of time value of money questions. So there'll be some questions on the exam for time value of money. So let's go over these. Now this, I'm going to show you the solutions here. They're kind of doing things the old fashioned way, and this publisher is, but the answers are the same. So you can use the formulas if you want to, or you can use the calculator. I don't mind if you use the calculator when you're taking the test. Okay, so let's take a look at these. Okay, so the first one was 3-2. Okay, so let's take a look here. Okay, so at the end of each year, a self-employed person deposits $1,500 in an investment account that earns 7% annually. How much will be in the account when the individual retires at age 65? If the individual started when the person was 45 years old. All right, so so basically that is a future value of an annuity. So if you recall, an annuity is when equal payments are made or received. So they're saying that this person is going to put in $1,500 a year for 20 years, from age 45 to 65. They're going to earn 7%. What do they have at the end of this? And so this number here that they're getting, way back in the Stone Age, which is like 25 years ago, you used to have these tables. And in other words, they would call it interest factors, and they would give you could look up the percentage and the number of years, and it would give you the multiple. And that's what that is. That's why they have this number here. They're still using those old tables. But let's just look at this. Let's see how, as I said, you can use the formulas if you want that are in the book. If you're a finance major, I recommend that you be familiar with the formulas, but it's fine to use Excel when doing, if you use Excel to do the homework, that's fine. Or if you use your financial calculator. So let's take a look and see here. Then this is how you would put this in your calculator. So we're wanting to know what the future value is of $1,500. They put this in as a negative number because the calculator reads one thing as an inflow and one thing as an outflow. When you're putting money in, that's an outflow. So you're going to hit $1,500, and the plus minus sign makes it negative. So the payment is $1,500. You didn't put anything up today. There's no lump sum today. So the present value is 0. N is 20. Interest rate is 7. And this is what you have after 20 years. $61,493. So we were doing something interesting in the financial planning class this morning, Finance 470. I know a couple of you are in that class too, but we were doing annuities, and we decided, what if you took your COVID money? What if you didn't have to spend that COVID money? If you didn't need it and you were disciplined enough and you saved it. And so the average, a lot of people got these 3 payments and they got $7,000 in COVID money. So we calculated the future value of $7,000 lump sum, one-time payment of $7,000. Okay. 10% over 40 years. So you just dump that 7 grand into an IRA and you just let it ride at 10% for until you're 60 years old. It was $316,000 lagniappe for you. That equaled out to like about $2,500. $2,500 a month you could withdraw for the next 30 years and not even touch the principal. So the reason I'm telling you this is because the power of compounding is awesome. And once you start saving over time, it really does add up. So anyway, you should have gotten 61,493 here. So this is the future value of an annuity. Okay, let's go to B. How much additional money will be in the account if the individual stops making contributions at age 65, but defers until age 70? Okay, so this is really awesome. Just 5 years. Okay, so this is what they're saying. At age, when I turn 65 here, I'm going to not make contributions anymore, but I'm just going to let this $61,000 ride for the next 5 years at 7%. So it's 61,000. So this is the future value of a lump sum, which is going to be 61,493 times 1.07 to the 5th power. 1.07 to the 5th power is 1.4. Multiply that, and look at that. I've got another $25,000 just by letting it ride for 5 years. So that's almost increased it by 50% in just 5 years. So then again, here, that's the power of compounding there. All right. Okay, and then let's look at C. How much additional money will be in the account if the individual continues making the contributions but defers to age 70? So what if you just let it continuously let this ride? So you can redo number 1 and just change it from 20 years to 25 years. Right here, just change N to 25 and you would end up with $94,000. So 33, so you've got 24, you basically almost have $25,000 if you stop making contributions but let it ride. But if you just continue making your contributions, you would have over 50% more in just those last 5 years. So you can see the old adage, it takes money to make money. And once you have this little nest egg set up, it increases exponentially because of the time value of money. Okay, for part D, compare the 2 answers B and C. What is the effect of continuing the contributions? What is the difference between the 2 answers? So the difference is it's the 33,000 versus the 24,000. Right, any questions on that one? Okay, let's look at 3. A saver wants $100,000 after 10 years and believes that it's possible to earn an annual rate of return of 8% on invested funds. All right, what amount must be invested each year to accumulate 100,000? If 1, the payments are made at the beginning of the year, or 2, if they're made at the end of the year. Okay, so basically what they're asking there is the present value of an annuity. That's if the payments are made at the end of the year. And the other one is you're solving for the payments on the present value of an annuity. The second one is the present value of an annuity due if you are making the payments at the beginning of the year. All right, so let's see if they have the, okay, so for this one, okay, well, you can just put it, they don't give you the financial calculator thing for the ordinary annuity. Here it is. So your present value is going to be 0. N is 10 years. The interest rate is 8%, 8. The future value is $1,000. So you're wanting to know, what do your payments have to be if if you want to have $1,000 saved in 10 years at 8%. And it's going to be 6902.95. Okay, so this is the present value of an ordinary annuity. So you're making $1,000 payments at the end of each. You'd have to make these payments of 6209 at the end of each year, and you'd have $100,000 at the end of the 10 years. Now, what if instead you made the payments at the beginning of the year, starting today, and then the beginning of year 2 and so forth? Well, you change so basically the way you get that answer is you can take this number and you multiply that times 1.1, because an annuity basically, if you're making the payments at the beginning of the year, you're just getting an extra year of compounding. So if you took this answer and you multiplied by 1.08, it's 8%, you would get the answer to your annuity due, which is 63.91. So if you're making the payments at the beginning of the year, it would be 63.91 versus 69.02. And then so to calculate this on the financial calculator, you just change your calculator to the beginning mode. And so the way to do that is you hit the second button and then you hit the payment. Hang on, let me get the calculator and it's second payment and then second and set. It's either second and set or enter. So if you go to, well, I'm sharing the screen so you can't see it, but you hit second, and right above the payment, it says begin. So you hit second payment and then second and set. That'll put you in beginning mode and you can calculate that. And then don't forget to change it back. Otherwise, your other answers are going to be wrong. All right. Yeah, it defaults to end. It should be an end unless you're calculating an annuity due. Okay. Okay. So that's a, let's see, that was, oh, okay. That's, where are we here? Okay. Okay. And then 3B is how much must be invested if the expected yield is only 5%. And so you just change the interest rate. And if it's 5%, you would have to put in $79.50 if it's an ordinary annuity, or $75.72 if it's an annuity due. Okay, let's look at 4. An investment offers $10,000 per year for 20 years. If an investor can earn 6% annually on other investments, what is the current value of this investment? If its current price is $120,000, should the investor buy it? Okay, so this is an example of you've got this investment. It's gonna, so somebody says basically, I'm gonna pay you, if you give me $120,000, I'm gonna give you $10,000 a year for 20 years. So should you take that or not? If you could earn 6% on another investment, you have to figure out what the value of that investment would be if this one was paying you more or less than 6%. That's basically what they're asking. Okay, so let's take a look at 4 then. All right, so if you take okay, so we're going to figure out the present value of this investment. If you could make 6%, what is the present value? So if you took if you were going to receive $10,000 a year and you could get 6% on your money over 20 years. In other words, what this is asking is, how much should I put up now if I can earn 6% on my money and I want to withdraw $10,000 a year for 20 years? How much, what is that investment worth? How much should I put up now? So what this is telling us is that if you put $114,000 and $114,700 in this investment, that's making you 6% over 20 years, you could withdraw $10,000 a year for the next 20 years. So should you take the $120 offer, $120,000 offer that your friend is offering? No, because that's paying you less than 6%. The fair value of this is 114.7. Okay, if it were less than 114.7, then you should take that money, take that offer, because it's more than what you can make on the 6% deal. Okay, and then number 5. Let's see. Was assignment 1, was it 1 through 6? Yes, okay. Okay, so let's see, number 5, graduating seniors may earn $45,000. If the inflation rate is 2%, what must these graduates earn over 20 years to maintain their purchasing power? If inflation rises 4%, will they be maintaining their standard of living if they earn 100,000 after 20 years? Okay, so let's first let's say, so what we're going to do is we're going to take $45,000. We're going to find the future value of $45,000 over 20 years at 2%. So that's easy. The future value of a lump sum. If you're earning $45,000 a year and inflation, right here, inflation is 2% over the next 20 years. In order to keep up with inflation, obviously you need to get a 2% raise every year, but you would, in 20 years, you would have to be making $66,870 just to keep up, to make it equal. So you can, this is using the formula. This is simply the future value of a lump sum. The present value times 1 plus the interest rate to the nth power. So you'd have to make $66,870. If you put it in your financial calculator, the present value is $45,000. That's what you're making. 20 years, 2%, 0 payment because there's no payments involved. And the future value is $66,868. It's always going to be a little bit different using your financial calculator versus the formulas. So and if you didn't put this in as a negative number, your answer would come out negative. It doesn't matter. You just disregard the negative sign. So you've got you'd have to be making $66,870 to maintain the purchasing power of $45,000. At a 4% annual rate of inflation, the salary would have to be $98,595. So let's do the 4%. So if inflation were 4% a year, you would have to be making $98,600 basically. This is the financial calculator solution. This is with the formula. So if you're earning 100,000 after this amount of time, after 20 years, you're okay, because you're making more than the 98,600. If inflation is 5%, though, it wouldn't be enough because you would have to be making 119,398 if inflation were 5%. So you can really see here how inflation erodes your salaries, erodes your income. Inflation in general ranges between 2 and 3% on average, but on food and medicine, education, it's been higher. And medical, on medical care, it's more like 4%. Okay, number 6, a person who is retiring at age 65 and who has 200,000 wants to leave an estate of at least 30,000. How much can the individual withdraw annually on the 200,000 starting at the end of the year if the funds are 8% and the person's life expectancy is 85 years? Okay, so the best way to do this is just skip out here. Let's go up to this. This is the best way to calculate this right here. So you have your present value is 200,000. You've got $200,000 in the bank right now. When this is all said and done, you want to leave $30,000. So you want the future value, after 30 years, you want there to be 30,000 left in the account. So the present value is 200,000. You want to leave 30,000, so your future value should be 30,000. N is 20 years. The interest rate is 8%. How much can you withdraw annually at the end of each year and have $30,000 left in the account at the end? And this is the answer. You could withdraw $19,715 and have,
Why would you make the $30,000 negative?
oh, because the question is, why would you make the $30,000 negative? Because the only reason is because the calculator, if you have a present value and a future value, it reads one as an inflow and one as an outflow. So you're going to get an error message on your calculator if you entered them both positive.
Because I've always seen like with present value is negative in a lot of problems, but I've never seen.
Yeah, you could put the present value as negative, it'd be the same.
So it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Right. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay, so that was 6. What's the next one that was assigned? 9. Okay, let's go to 9. All right, the following questions illustrate non-annual compounding. Okay, so some things pay, some investments pay interest annually, others pay interest semi-annually, monthly, quarterly. And so the more often the interest is compounded, the greater percentage you're making. So for example, if you were, let's say I was making 10% interest once a year. If I was making 10% interest compounded semi-annually, I would be making 5% interest twice a year. And so when I get that first interest payment after 6 months, I have a higher balance. And so you're earning interest on the interest. So when you have more frequent compounding, more frequent than 1 year, you're actually making a higher interest rate. Okay, so that's what they're illustrating here in this, in question 9. So $100 is placed in an account that pays 12%. How much will there be in the account after 1 year if it's compounded annually, semi-annually, or monthly? Okay, so obviously here, compounded annually, the future value is going to be $100 times 1.12 is $112. You've made 12%. This is how you would put it in your financial calculator. If it's compounded semi-annually, what you do is you divide the interest rate by 2 and you multiply n by 2. Okay, so this is semi-annual. So then it's going to be $100 times 1.06 squared. And so you end up having $112.40. Because what happens is after 6 months, you have $106. And then you're earning those last 6 months is off of $106 and not $100. And that's what gives you your 40 more cents. So here's how you put it in the financial calculator. N is going to be 2 compounding periods. And the interest rate is 6%. So instead of getting 12% once a year, you're getting paid 6% twice a year. All right, then monthly compounding, that is going to be 12% divided by 12. So that's 1%, 12 times a year. So you're getting paid 1% a month. So it's going to be 1.01 to the 12th power times $100. So that's $112.70. If you put it in your calculator, N is 12 and the interest rate is 1. Okay. So actually the way this works, since it's $100 here, let's just look at this. So what is the actual interest rate? It's actually called the effective annual rate. If it's compounded annually, the stated rate is 12%. The effective annual rate is 12%. But if something is compounded more often than annually, your effective annual rate is higher than the annual rate or the stated rate, or which we also call the nominal rate. So with semi-annual compounding, I'm actually making 12.36%. With monthly compounding, I'm actually making 12.68%. This also works, so this works to our advantage if we're investors. But what about if we have credit card debt? Or if we're paying off loans? It works to our disadvantage. So if you're making monthly payments on a credit card and they're charging you 12%, you're actually paying 12.68% on that credit card. Okay, let's take a look at B. $100 will be received after 1 year. What is the present value if the amount, so it's the same question, only the present value. So here we're going to take the present value of, so in other words, how much money would I have to put up if I wanted to have $100 at the end of the year? And I'm getting, and the interest is being earned annually. Well, it's simply $100. It's the future value divided by 1 plus the interest rate to the nth power. So we take $100 divided by 1.12, and I have to put up $89.30. What if I was making interest semi-annually? Well, then it's going to be $100 divided by 1.06 squared. So I could put up a little bit less money because I'm earning more money because of the compounding. So $89 instead of $89.29. And then what if it was compounded monthly? $100 divided by 1.01 to the 12th power, and I would only have to put up $88.70. Okay, so that shows you the effects of compounding semi-annually, monthly. There's quarterly compounding too. In that case, you divide and multiply by 4. The savings accounts, some savings accounts used to have daily compounding. I haven't seen that for a while, but when I was a kid, I remember the Bank of America had daily compounding. So I remember thinking, oh, that must work out to be a lot of money with daily compounding. It doesn't really. You divide by 365 and it goes to the 365th power. It's really not that much more money. Okay, so that's the compounding. Okay, what's the next question? 11. Okay, this is a life insurance question. You purchased a $100,000 life insurance policy for a single payment of $35,000. If you want it to earn 9% on the invested funds, how soon must you die for the policy to be a superior alternative? If you die within 10 years, what is the return on the investment? Okay, so let's answer the first one. So that seems like a morbid question, but that's what life insurance is all about. It's like, do I really need life insurance? You know, I could save that $35,000 on my own and make more money eventually than $100,000 for sure. But if I die before that date, then I'm better off with the life insurance. So that's kind of what they're asking here. So of course, if you die tomorrow or within the next few years, you're better off with the life insurance. So they're asking, how soon must you die for you have been better off to have purchased that life insurance? So what we're going to do is solve for n. Let's see here. So let's go down here to the calculator, the calculator thing. So I'm out $35,000. So I've invested $35,000. Okay. That's my present value. I can earn 9%. I could have earned, I mean, I bought the insurance policy, but I'm assuming if I invested this money, how long would it take to reach 100,000? So I invested 35, it's 9% interest rate. I'm solving for n. The future value is 100,000 and it is 12.18. So what does that mean? N of 12.18. What are your conclusions there? What are they trying to tell us with this problem? Anybody on Zoom want to chime in? For problem 11, what are they trying to tell us?
It's going to take like 12 years, 12, about 12 years for you to get to that $100,000 value or whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So if I kick the bucket in 9 years, was I better off buying the insurance policy?
No.
Yeah. If I die in
Yeah,
20,
yeah, my bad.
yeah.
Yeah.
If I die in 20 years, I should have not bought the insurance policy, right? You see what I'm saying? That's basically what it is.
No matter when you die, they have to buy it, so they'll give you $100,000.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So if I die, if I buy this insurance policy and I die 12 years in 1 month, basically, or 12 years in 2 months, roughly 1.5 months. If I die just a little over 12 years, that's my break even point. So if I live beyond 12 years, I would have been better off not buying the insurance policy and investing this money because I would have had more. You see, it would have been worth more. But what's insurance all about? I mean, we just went through a hurricane. Insurance is about mitigating your risk, right? Some people are really upset, me included, because we all have 5% deductibles and that's a lot of money for people, you know. So yeah, we mitigated our risk, but we do have the deductibles to pay. That's a whole nother story. I won't get into that. But anyway, insurance is all about mitigating our risk because if I die, I want to take care of my family. If I die within the next 5 to 10 years, then I would have been better off. But you don't know. And so I buy this insurance because I can't, if I invest this $35,000 and I die within, you know, within say a year or two, they won't have, it'll be a hardship. But, so anyway, this is my break even number. So if I die before 12 years, I'm better off with the insurance because I'm getting 100,000 and I wouldn't have saved enough. I wouldn't have made it to 100,000 by investing this. But if I live beyond 12 years, I would have been better off taking that 35,000 and just investing it because I will have more than 35, will have more than 100,000. So let's say that I die 30 years later. Well, if I die 30 years later, I would have been much better off not taking this insurance because I'm just going to get 100,000. Okay, so what if you see, then the next question is, what if you die within 10 years? If you die within, let's see, the second part is, if you die within 10 years, what is the return on your investment? So in this case, N is 10, come down here. I put up $35,000 and then in 10 years, I'm going to be collecting 100,000. Well, my family is. So what's my rate of return? 11.07%. The sooner you die, obviously, the better, the higher the return is going to be. But yeah, when you think about life insurance, I teach an insurance class in the springtime, and it really is all about, it's all about risk. And if you want to accept the risk, or if you want to transfer the risk to somebody else. And if with life insurance, you're transferring that risk to someone else, to the insurance company, so that you can have peace of mind. So let me ask you this real quick, since we're talking about insurance here. Do you think you need life insurance? I mean, you guys, millennials, if you're young and healthy, do you need life insurance? Probably not. I mean, an insurance agent would tell you, yes, you need life insurance. But I would say no. And most, this is the criteria. If you don't have any liabilities, if you don't have anyone to take care of, if you don't have any dependents, you don't have any debts, you don't really need life insurance. I mean, if your parents have enough money to bury you, unless you want a burial policy, you don't need life insurance. So you only need life insurance if you have dependents that you need to take care of. Unless you feel like, unless you have some kind of genetic issues, or you're worried that you might that you might have poor health later on, where the rates will be so much higher, then it would make sense to get insurance when you're younger. But if you don't have any dependents, there's really no reason to get insurance unless you're worried about the rates going up on you. If you have, if heart disease runs in your family or something, or high blood pressure, because they do charge you more if you have these health risks. And as technology advances, they have more advanced screening processes to charge higher risk people more. Okay, what's the next one? 18. Okay.
Hey.
Okay, this sounds like a house issue. All right, you have an elderly aunt who just sold her house for $365,000 and entered a retirement community that charges $100,000 annually. If she can earn 6% on her funds, how long will the funds from the sale of the house cover the cost of the retirement community? Okay, so this is like a really tactful way of saying, when is she going to run out of money? Which is a real issue for some people. So we want to find out. So the present value is, let's go to the financial calculator here. The present value is $365,000. That's how much she has in her account. She can earn 6% on it. Her payments are $100,000 a year. How old is she? It doesn't say how old she is. And how long before this account goes to zero? So you see 365 is the present value. The payments are 100,000. You're taking 100,000 out a year. The future value is zero. It's going to be depleted. You can only earn 6%. In 4.24 years, that account's going to be depleted. So this is when I worked as a financial planner, a few of my clients had these kind of depressing situations where they were worried they were going to outlive their money. That's why it's important for you guys to start saving while you're young, so you don't outlive your money. Anyway, that's the answer to that. Is that the last one? Is what, 22? 22, okay. Your first child is now a 1-year-old. Tuition currently costs $60,000 to attend a public college for 4 years. If the costs rise 5% annually, how much must you invest each year to cover the expenses after 18 years if you're able to earn 10% annually? Okay, so this is an annuity problem. They made it kind of complicated here. Let's see. All right, so first of all, we have to figure out what 60,000 is. Okay, that's for 4 years. Okay, so they're just doing the whole lump sum. So they're saying today it costs $60,000 to attend a 4-year college. And inflation is going to be 5%. How much will it be after 18 years? So so let's first see how much it's going to cost us. So this is a typo here with this comma. Let me fix that. Okay, so 60,000 is the present value. Inflation is 5% over 18 years. What will 60,000 be at 5% in 18 years? $144,000. Yikes. So what it costs $60,000 now to send a kid to 4 years of college is going to be $144,000 in 18 years. Next question, how much do I have to invest a year to have $144,000 in 18 years if I can make 10%? Okay, so we come back here now. This future value is now the present value. Wait. I'm sorry, the future value stays the future value. So there's no present value. So what we're saying here is we want to have $144,000 in 18 years. We can earn 10% on it. How much do I have to contribute annually to this account in order to get to the $144,000 in 18 years? So I would have to contribute, it's not that bad, actually, $3,000. $3,000 in $3,166 a year for 18 years and I've got $144,000 saved to send my kid to school. That breaks down to three monthly. That's only $264 a month. So again, if you start saving early on, if you start saving when your kids are babies, then you'll have money for them to go to school. So that's, anyway, that's the answer there, 3166. That's the last question, huh? Okay. Okay, any questions on the homework?
Were we supposed to turn this in on Moodle?
Oh, you can turn it on Moodle, you can turn it in to me if you're here.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can turn in a hard copy here. Okay, so we're gonna take a break. I'm gonna stop recording for the break. Let's take 10 minutes and then we'll come back and we're gonna go over chapter 4. Okay, we're back. So this chapter is on financial planning. We're going to talk about financial planning and some of the tax laws regarding your investments. And then at the end, we're going to talk about market efficiency. So first of all, when you think about financial planning, you really need to think about your investment objectives. And there, you should have specific objectives for different things such as emergency funds for emergencies, funds for future purchases, say example, funds for retirement. So really that when we talk about emergency funding or future purchases or funds for retirement, what does that entail? In other words, what's the difference between funds for emergencies versus funds for retirement? Huh?
like urgency.
Yeah, the time, right? Urgent. So if an emergency fund, that's money that you would need right away versus funds for retirement is something, way out in the future. It's definitely, that's long-term versus emergency. An emergency would be short-term. Funds for future purchases might be intermediate term, it could be long-term or could be somewhat short-term, but probably in between. So how much money do you think, I'm talking about months of salary or months of living expenses. What do you think would be an adequate fund for emergencies? How much should you have saved for emergencies?
6 months.
Okay, 6 months. Any people on Zoom? Any input there from the Zoom people? So we have 6 months. You think it should be more or less or the same? Anybody? Madison, David, Ashley, Pavle, Zach?
No, ma'am.
What do you think about, how much do you think should be saved for emergencies?
I say at least $10,000.
Which would be like, what's about 6 months of savings? I mean, it depends on your expenses. Hang on, I got to plug my computer in. So really, I think this hurricane is going to be a big wake-up call for a lot of people because most of us have not, me included, I don't have a dedicated, my deductible is $5,700. I don't have $5,700 lying around where I said, okay, I'm gonna have a fund to cover my deductible. I'm gonna have $5,700 sitting in cash every hurricane season just in case, which probably should have done. I mean, I'm sure some people have done that, but I think they'd be in the minority, but that would have been the smart thing to do. But anyway, when you think about an emergency fund, anything can happen. You know, we've had COVID for the past year and a half, 2 years, we've had to deal with COVID and now this hurricane. So a lot of people, I think, are realizing how important it is to have an emergency fund. And so really 3 to 6 months, I think, is a good idea. I mean, most people unfortunately have less than a month of expenses saved. And it really can affect your family. I mean, that can make the difference between you being able to evacuate or not, if you don't have savings. So anyway, 3 to 6 months is a good rule of thumb for emergency funding. So what would you invest if you're saving for an emergency, what would you invest that money in? Would you put it in Robinhood? Maybe buy some GameStop, maybe throw some AMC in there? Probably not. I mean, if it's a fund for emergencies, you're going to have it in cash. You're going to put it in a savings account, checking, or a money market account. And so a money market account is an account that invests in short-term debt instruments. It's short-term government bonds. So let's say that you opened up an account at Schwab and you had an investment account at Schwab or at Fidelity. You could have, let's say you had $10,000 in there and you wanted to have 5,000 invested for emergencies. Well, you could just take $5,000 from that account, or keep it in the same account, but just take $5,000 and just say, okay, I'm putting that over in a money market fund. That's no risk. That's for emergencies. And then the rest of it, you just invest in some longer term investments. So anyway, I think it's a wake up call for a lot of people down here that they should have an emergency fund of at least 3 months of savings, and also have another emergency fund to pay these deductibles, because it's going to be a hardship for a lot of people who don't have the funds to meet their deductibles. Now, I did hear, you can share this with your family, that FEMA supposedly, I haven't read anything about this, but I heard this from a colleague, that FEMA will pay the difference. So if let's say you have an $11,000 deductible and your roof is $15,000, so that means your insurance is only going to give you $4,000. You're at $11,000. FEMA, you can apply for FEMA funds to help cover the difference. I'm sure there's a limit, but people who have to put out additional funding because of their deductible, FEMA, they should get some assistance from FEMA. Okay, anyway, so these are basically different reasons, different investment objectives. So if you're saving for future purchases, it's a little bit longer term, so you can take a little bit more risk. Funds for retirement, a lot of times people think about, oh, well, it's my retirement account. I should be really safe in investing in that money. It should be in really safe investments. Actually, you should think just the opposite, for 2 reasons. Retirement accounts are long-term. You're not going to retire for another 40, 45 years. Okay. That's the first reason. You have a long-term time horizon. The other reason is these retirement accounts are tax deferred. So why not invest your retirement funds in small cap stocks, in companies that are going to give you a lot of capital appreciation, because you don't have to pay the capital gains on any of these tax deferred investments. So there's a school of thought that your most risky investments should be in your retirement account, because you don't have to pay any taxes on it. The way retirement accounts work is you don't pay the taxes until you withdraw the money as a distribution. So you don't have to worry about the capital gains taxes. So that's one school of thought that really is kind of counterintuitive to what a lot of people think about retirement accounts. Okay. Now, when you think about financial statements, you've all studied company financial statements. Well, you can you can prepare financial statements around your own personal finances. For example, you can prepare a balance sheet that shows your personal finances. So in other words, your balance sheet is a personal balance sheet would look like this. Well, let me ask you this. What would your assets be? What would be some examples of assets on a personal balance sheet, do you think?
Your house, your vehicles.
Right, everything you own. So you would have your current assets would be your checking account, your savings account. You would have your paper assets. And then you would have your real assets or non-paper assets, non-financial assets, like your house, your cars, your car, your personal property. So examples of your assets, all your financials, all your financial investments, your car, your house, your personal property, retirement accounts, anything of that matter. And then your liabilities, everything that you owe, your car loan, your mortgage, if you have any credit card debt, if you have any student loans, those are examples of your liabilities. Your assets minus your liabilities equals your net worth. That's owner's equity in a company balance sheet. And so you have the assets on one side, on the other side, you have your liabilities and your net worth. So if you take everything that you own and you take everything that you owe, subtract everything that you owe out, the balance there is your net worth. So most people have a positive net worth, but it's possible when you're young and starting out that you might have a negative net worth. If you just bought a car, if you just bought a house and don't have a lot of equity in the house and you have student loans, you could have a negative net worth for a while. But as you get older, your net worth is going to grow because your assets are going to grow in value, your physical assets and your financial assets. So that's an individual balance sheet. Then you can make a budget. I'm not going to go over that in this class. I go over that in the financial planning class. If you take that, we'll talk about the budget. You can also do a income statement for you as an individual. Everything, all the money coming in, all of your income, subtract out your expenses. And that's your net income or your cash, your excess cash, your income minus your expenses. And then you can also look at your statement of cash flows too, what's going in and what's going out. All right, so financial plans are fluid. You should monitor your financial plan periodically, at least once a year, and change it if your financial conditions change, if your objectives change. So it's something that you want to continually monitor. Okay, now how about investing? How about these different asset allocations? Normally, when we look at, we'll be talking about this, for the rest of the semester, but there's different types of asset classes in a portfolio and so forth. So what you're going to invest in is going to change or should change somewhat depending on the life cycle stage that you're in. So when you're young, typically when you're young, you can be 100% in the stock market. As I mentioned, the average return in the market is 12%. I wouldn't count on that, but you can count on a minimum, I think, of earning 8% in the market. So when you're young, 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s, there's no problem, in my opinion, if you're up to taking that type of risk, to be 100% in the market, in your retirement accounts, in your investment accounts. As you get closer to retirement, you might want to take some risk off the table. And so you should maybe be more in bonds and even be a little bit more in cash, but definitely go into bonds and in some stocks that aren't quite as risky. Because if we have a downturn in the market, if there's a correction, you don't have time on your side. And so certainly as you get as you get older, you want to have less risk, but it depends a lot of times on how much you're comfortable with. Because the way some people think is, some people in their 50s and 60s, they're still totally in the market because they're saying, well, I still think I'm going to live till I'm 80. So I have a long-term time horizon. So I want to stay in the market. But it just depends on your, on how risk tolerant you are. Okay. Taxation is a big issue, and it always has been a big issue everywhere, not just this country. We want to try to limit our taxes legally. And so we're taxed on our income and we're taxed on property. The federal income tax system is progressive in this country. That means that the more you make, the higher your tax rate is. And so the tax rates start at around 10%. They go up to around 30% or so. And so what that means is at certain income levels, your tax rate increases. And so that's what a progressive tax system means, is that the more you make, the more taxes you pay, versus a flat tax. A lot of countries in Europe and in Great Britain, they have a flat tax. For example, a lot of these countries, everybody just pays 50%. So why do you, and some people see that as regressive. They see that as not being fair. So why would you think that a tax where everybody pays the same percentage, that sounds fair, huh? Why do people think that's not fair? Why do they like this progressive system better, where the more you make, the more you pay, percentage wise? Anybody?
Maybe because of the standard of living. That's right between the lower end of working class.
Exactly. It has to do with the standard of living. If I'm making $120,000 a year and I'm in the 50% tax bracket, I'm taking home 60 grand. I can live comfortably on 60 grand. If I'm making 30,000 a year, I'm taking home 15,000. I can't live very comfortably on 15,000. Yeah. So the idea is it penalizes people in the lower income brackets. So that's why we have this progressive tax system. All right. So a tax shelter, you don't hear too much about tax shelters anymore, but it either avoids taxes, reduces taxes, or defers taxes. You can consider a retirement plan as somewhat of a tax shelter because it's deferring our taxes. So here's some example of some tax shelters. Tax deferred pension plans or retirement plans. The reason why they're considered tax shelters is because if you work for a company and you contribute to a retirement plan, you don't have to pay taxes on that income. So let's say that you're making $50,000 a year and you're contributing $10,000 to your retirement plan. So you're deferring $5,000. You're not going to be taxed on $50,000 of income. You're only going to be taxed on $45,000 of income. So all of the money that you're putting into this retirement plan is tax deferred, meaning you're not paying taxes on it now. But when you take the money out, when you retire, that's when you pay taxes on the distributions. So that's the cool thing about capital gains. You don't have to pay taxes on these capital gains in these pension plans. You just when you take the money out, that's when you pay the taxes. And so the idea is when you're retired, you should be in the theory is you'll be in a lower tax bracket than when you're working. And so the taxes are deferred and then you're going to pay a lower rate. That may or may not be true with what's going on today, because with all the debt that we've accumulated, our taxes are going to be going up in the long run. So we might be paying higher taxes, but I wouldn't count on paying less taxes when I retire or when you retire, because if you're successful, if you've saved money over time, you'll probably be in the same bracket as when you were working. But anyway, it's still a good deal to contribute to these pension plans, because you're accumulating wealth and you are deferring the taxes. So that's why, that's one example of a tax shelter. Tax deferred annuities, that's the same thing. It's just as a pension plan, very similar. That's where you purchase these annuities through insurance companies sell them, and you don't pay the taxes now. You're deferring the taxes when you take the distributions out. And then long-term capital gain. So a capital gain is if you, any asset that you have, if you buy it low and sell high, if you've made a profit, that's a capital gain. That's called a capital gain. So if you bought stock at a certain price and the price of that stock goes up, that's a capital gain. Now you have unrealized and realized capital gains. It's paper profits until you've sold it. So if let's say you've made a bunch of money in Bitcoin or a bunch of money in GameStop or anything for that matter, you don't have to pay any capital gains taxes on it until you sell it. And so, and if you've held it for longer than 1 year, it's a long-term capital gains. So capital gains are profits on assets. If you buy stock low, sell high, that's a capital gain. Real estate. If you bought a property and you sold at a higher price, that's a capital gain. And so it's called a shelter because you don't have to pay the taxes until you actually realize those capital gains. So with real estate, there's a really cool rule. If it's your primary house and you've lived in that house for 2 out of 5 years, you are exempt from paying capital gains tax, from paying taxes on your capital gains. So if you buy a house, the market's been doing the housing market's been doing really well. So let's say you buy a house, you're up $50,000 in that house. You've lived in it for at least 2 years. You sell it, you roll that money into another house, live there for 2 years. You can continue doing this and not pay any capital gains on your primary home. But if it's a vacation home or something, you'll have to pay the capital gains. Now, you can deduct out any improvements that you've put into that house to sell it and any real estate fees and so forth. So you can try to minimize those capital gains. With a stock, well, they're probably going to talk. Yeah, there's more information about capital gains with the stock. So let's I'm going to talk using this slide. I'm going to talk about capital gains regarding stocks. And there's some really cool strategies you can use to minimize your capital gains. Hopefully you won't have to pay capital gains. And your heirs can pay it when you leave them all this money that you've accumulated from investing after taking this class. Okay, so capital gains are either short-term or long-term. If you've held, so I'm just going to refer to stocks as an example. If you've held a stock for 1 year or less, it's a short-term capital gain. That is going to be taxed at your regular tax rate. So whatever rate you're paying on your income, you're going to have to pay capital gains taxes on that, on those short-term capital gains. Now, if you own a stock and it's gone way up and you feel like the market's going to correct, that's not a reason. Taxes are never a reason not to sell it. I mean, if you think it's going down, by all means, going to go down, by all means, you should sell it. But you will pay tax if it's a short term. If you've held it less than 1 year, you're going to pay taxes on it. If you've held it short, you're going to pay taxes at your regular tax rate. If you've held it for 366 days, 1 day longer than a year or longer, then it's a long-term capital gain and it's taxed at a much lower rate. For most of us, that's around 10%. For some of us, it's a 15%. So the long-term capital gains rate is much lower than the short-term capital gains rate. So try, if it works out, try to hold the stock at least a year before selling, because then you'll have the long-term, you'll only be taxed at the long-term rate. Okay, so those are the long and short-term capital gains. Now, there's a way to mitigate your gains. Again, you're only taxed once you sell the stock. So you're only taxed once it becomes realized. Now, you can hold on to the asset indefinitely and postpone your capital gains. Once you pass away and it goes to your heirs, then they're going to have to pay capital gains taxes on it. But before that, you don't have to pay any capital gains. Now, there's a really cool way to offset your capital gains. You can offset your capital gains with capital losses. So this is what a lot of people do. Let's say that throughout the year, you have this account in Robinhood, let's just say, and you've sold some stocks, you made some money. Let's say you've made $1,000 in this Robinhood account, realized capital gains. And so it gets to be December and you say, well, shoot, I don't want to have to pay taxes on that. I'm going to have to pay like 20% taxes on that profit that I really worked hard for. I don't want to give it to Uncle Sam. Well, go through your account and see if you have any losers. If you have anything that you've invested in that's lost money, you can sell those stocks and take the loss, and you can use the capital losses to offset your capital gains. So ideally, if you had $1,000 in losses, you could offset that. You could sell that stock to have $1,000 in capital losses to offset your $1,000 in capital gains. You pay 0 in taxes. You can actually take up to $3,000 in a capital loss. So let's say you had $4,000 in losses, 1,000 in gains and 4,000 in losses. You could deduct $3,000 on your taxes of that. So you can deduct your losses up to $3,000 a year. So now they have what's called a wash sale, because a lot of people thought, well, that's really cool. Let's say I own ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil's down. I have a loss in ExxonMobil. So I'll just sell ExxonMobil and take the loss to offset my capital gains, and then I'll just buy it back the next day. Well, the IRS won't allow you to do that. If you buy something back prior to 30 days from selling it, they disregard your capital loss. And so you can't do that. But how can I get around that? I'm asking you guys. Exactly. Or another stock. So this is what I'll do in December, which I'm going to do this December because I have some losses. I've made some capital gains in my Robinhood account, and I've got some losses in there. So I'll just, let's say, I don't know, let me think of something. Let's just say that I'm losing money in Southwest Air. I sell Southwest Airlines and I buy Delta Airlines or American Airlines. If I'm losing money in ExxonMobil, I sell ExxonMobil and I buy Chevron. They're not identical, but they're in the same sector, they're in the same industry, and they're going to go up eventually. So if I know that, I know that ExxonMobil is going to go up eventually, but I've got this wash rule, I'll just buy a competitor. Or I could buy an exchange traded fund. If it's an oil services company that I'm selling, I could just buy OIH, which is an oil services ETF. So there's ways around that. So that's what a lot of people will do. Then you can offset. So ideally, you should never have to pay taxes on these little capital gains that we accumulate throughout the year. Now, if you have a lot of capital losses, you can carry those forward infinitely. So let's say you were around in 2007 and 2009 and you lost a lot of money in the market. Let's say you have like, I don't know, $30,000 in losses. Well, you can use those losses carried forward to offset any capital gains, and you can take up to $3,000 every year in capital losses.
So all you're just realizing capital losses. And so I'm having trouble visualizing like the goal behind it. Breaking even, right?
You're avoiding taxes.
But so you're telling me that by avoiding the taxes, it's better than just them taking the 30% off of your $1,000 in capital gains.
Yeah, because I'm buying a competitor, even though I'm breaking even.
So that's how you come back from it.
Right.
You can't just recognize capital losses, and you have to ideally you need to buy
Well, I'm doing that as an investor. I can realize my capital losses and just say, I made a mistake. But I want to try to not, but if I wanted, so in other words, let's say it was, let's say it's Bitcoin. That's a good example. Let's say I have a capital loss in Bitcoin. And so I sell my Bitcoin. Let's say I've lost $1,000 in Bitcoin and I have $1,000 capital gain. So I sell my Bitcoin, take that $1,000 loss so I don't pay any taxes. And I just say, that was a lesson learned. I'm not buying Bitcoin again. I broke even. So my account, yeah, on the whole has broken even. But my point is, if you have a stock that's down, let's say you bought something and it's gone down, but you know that eventually it's going to go back up and you want to still be in that industry, you could just buy a competitor within the 30 days. So because of the wash rule. Now, after 30 days, you can buy that company back, but it might go up. So you can buy a competitor in the meantime, is my point. You see. So that, anyway, that's the way to mitigate your capital gains. Now, of course, you're only subject to these capital gains in a regular investment account. Okay. So you should only have money and invest in an investment account once you have exhausted, well, I'm going to explain this two ways. A lot of financial planners will say you should contribute as much as you can to your retirement account. Max out what you can to your company retirement account. Then if you can open up a Roth IRA, put in the $6,000 a year. After you've maxed out those retirement vehicles, then you should open up a taxable investment account. The reason is because with an investment account, you have to pay taxes on your gains. With these retirement accounts, you don't have to pay any taxes on the gains. You just are taxed, like with a regular IRA, you're taxed at the end. With a Roth IRA, which we haven't really talked about it too much in this class, but with a Roth IRA, you're never taxed at all on your earnings because you don't get a tax deduction. So remember this slide on tax shelters? A Roth IRA is not a tax shelter. A Roth IRA, you're contributing with after-tax dollars. So you've paid taxes on that money. So let's say you make $50,000 a year, you contribute $6,000 to an IRA. You're still going to pay taxes on that money that you contributed, income taxes on it. But once it's in that Roth IRA, you're never going to pay taxes on the interest, on the capital gains, on the dividends, and when you take it out, it's totally tax-free down the road. So that's the beauty of these Roth IRAs until hopefully they won't change the rules on us, because eventually they're going to figure out that's a lot of money that they're not getting tax revenue on, but they would have a revolt if they started taxing these Roth IRAs. So getting back to the tax rules, the capital gains and losses and the wash sale, you don't have to worry about capital gains with a retirement account or with an IRA, individual retirement account, company retirement account or individual retirement account. This is just these personal investment accounts that you have.
So with a regular IRA, does that mean that those dollars being taxed twice?
No, with a traditional IRA, when you put the money in, you get a tax deduction. Okay. When you take the money out, you have to pay taxes on it.
So the tax deduction is what
Pardon?
So the tax deduction is what basically makes it equal to.
The tax deduction makes it tax deferred. So a traditional IRA is just the same as a company retirement plan. You get that. So let's say you put $2,000 into a traditional IRA. When you fill out your taxes, you can deduct that $2,000 off of your taxable income. But when you get to be on the back end, but this is the way it works. When you're 59 and a half, don't ask me why it's a half, but when you're 59 and a half, you can start taking distributions. when you're 70 and a half, you have to, I think they changed it actually to 71. But anyway, when you're 71 and a half, you have to start taking distributions. So what they'll do is they have this chart that the companies have to use provided by the IRS. And they'll have to say, okay, if you're 70, you're going to live for 20 more years or whatever. And it's the denominator. So they divide your account balance by this denominator, and it gives you a minimum distribution that they have to withdraw. And they make you withdraw that money and you pay income taxes on it. So that's how that works. But that's with their company retirement plan, and then also with a regular IRA, traditional IRA. With a Roth IRA, let's just say I decide I'm going to contribute $6,000 this year. I just put the $6,000 in. I don't get any tax deduction at all, but I can buy Bitcoin with it. I mean, I can put it in I don't think Robinhood has IRA accounts, but I can put it in Schwab or Fidelity. I can buy whatever I want and never pay taxes on my capital gains, my interest, my dividends. When I take it out, I don't pay any taxes. So it's a great way to save money tax-free and transfer it to your heirs too, when you pass away, if you don't need the money. Okay, so short-term capital gains, you can use short-term losses to offset short-term gains, and then long-term losses to offset long-term gains. That's typically the way it's done. Okay, and this is just saying, if you're married filing jointly, your losses, you can't deduct more than $3,000 in losses, $1,500 if you're single. Which kind of sucks. I mean, I don't think that's near enough. $3,000 a year is not enough. They should really increase that. Okay, let's talk about pension plans. So we have defined benefit and defined contribution plans. Now, the reason these are important is because you all need to be thinking about retirement. You're not thinking about it now, I'm sure, because you're young, but you've seen with the homework that you did in chapter 3, the power of compounding. And basically saving, let me just give you a quick, let me just give you some quick numbers. If you're 20 and you save $1,200 a year, $100 a month, if you're 20 and you save $1,200 a year, by the time you're 65, you can be a millionaire easily. You will be a millionaire if you make 10%. If you make 8%, by the time you're saving $1,200 a year only, by the time you're 70 at 8%, you're a millionaire. If you wait until you're 40 to start saving, that $1,200 a year becomes $8,000 a year that you have to save. If you wait until you're 30, just 10 years, it's like $4,000 that you have to save. So it gets to be unattainable. But if you start when you're young, it doesn't take much money. And pretty soon you'll have $5,000 and you'll have $10,000, and you'll see that money just grows exponentially. And so that's the importance of having a pension plan, because if you're saving for retirement for the long run. Okay, so we're talking about company sponsored pension plans here. So there's two types. There's defined benefit and there's defined contribution. A defined benefit plan is the old fashioned pension plan that that's basically where you get a pension for the rest of your life. You work for a company for 30, 20, 30, 40 years, you retire and you get a set amount for the rest of your life. And it's the way it's calculated is they usually take your highest 3 years of earnings multiplied by the number of years of service. So let's say you retire, you're making $120,000 a year. $120,000 a year, they multiply that by 30 years, then they multiply that by a percentage, which is usually 2%. That's your annual retirement. And you get that for the rest of your life. So what happens if you leave that company early? What happens if you leave after 10 years? Well, then you got to wait until you're 65. And then they will start giving you that smaller pension. And it'll be whatever your salary was when you left, times the 2%, times the 10 years. So those those kinds of plans are not that common anymore because all the companies were taking all the risk with those plans. What the companies were doing is the actuaries were figuring out these present value factors and figuring out, well, how much do I have to put in for so-and-so? And how much do we have to contribute for this person and that person? And so they're taking the risk of the investment earnings that they're getting on that money to be able to pay you. And a lot of these pension plans have become underfunded because the market returns aren't what they projected, number one. And number two, people are living a lot longer than they projected. So a lot of these companies have gotten rid of their pension plans, which is fine by me because they've gone to these defined contribution plans. We're in control with these defined contribution plans. They're actually better in my opinion, because with a defined contribution plan, you are putting in money. You are probably contributing to the defined benefit plan too, but with a defined contribution plan, you're putting money into an account in your name. The company, those are called deferrals. The company is matching. Typically they're making a contribution. And that money that's your money once you become vested. The money you've put in is always yours. Usually it takes about 3 to 5 years for the money that the company has put in to become yours. But if you decide to leave that company, you can take that money with you. You can roll it over into a rollover IRA and put it in Schwab or Fidelity. So what they've done is they've shifted the risk from them to us. So we're taking all the risks. So what is your retirement plan? What is your retirement benefit with a defined contribution plan? It's whatever your account balance is when you retire. So and that's another important reason to take this class, in my opinion. And this is probably one of the most useful things you'll get out of this class is how, if I have a 401k plan, these defined contribution plans are called 401k plans. When I get out there in the real world and have a 401k plan, what investments am I going to pick? Because the companies don't pick the investments. We have to pick our own investments. They have a list of things to choose from. They have a list of mutual funds to pick from, but you need to know what you're going to pick. So and that's the biggest problem today with people in the workforce is they don't understand these retirement plans. They don't contribute enough. You should be contributing the maximum amount to where you're taking advantage of what the company's putting in if they're matching. So if they're going to give you a match up to 5%, you want to definitely be contributing 5% so you can get that match. It's free money. So, and then you got to know how to invest the money. So a lot of people think, oh, well, it's a retirement plan. It should be really safe. I'm just going to put it in cash. I'm putting it in a money market fund or a government bond. That is not smart because you won't even keep up with inflation in that situation. So it's important to learn about, these different, the basics of these different mutual funds, the different asset classes, because you're going to be responsible for making your investment choices when you retire or when you go to work. Okay, so those are the company sponsored pension plans. Then we have IRAs. Okay, so if you don't have a company sponsored pension plan, you can contribute to a traditional IRA. If you do have a company sponsored pension plan and you open up a traditional IRA, they're not going to give you the tax deduction. So there's no point if you have a company sponsored pension plan. But if you're married, let's say you're married and your spouse is staying at home, they can open what's called a spousal IRA, either traditional or a Roth. So if one spouse is working and the other isn't, the spouse that's not working can still open up an IRA. It's called a spousal IRA, as long as one spouse is working. And so the reason the IRS has started that is so that they don't penalize people who are staying at home, stay-at-home moms, stay-at-home dads, if you will. So a traditional IRA, as I mentioned, you can, if you're not covered by a pension plan, it's deductible, and you contribute to that traditional IRA. At the end of the year, you get a tax deduction. You don't have to pay any capital gains or anything, but when you start withdrawing the money, you have to pay taxes on those distributions. The best deal out there is, you can skip the Keogh plans. Those are really old plans. They're not that common. We talked about the 401k plans. That's just a defined contribution plan. A 403b plan is the same as a 401k, but if it's with a nonprofit organization. So a university, a hospital, school would be called a 403b. All right, a non-deductible Roth IRA or just a Roth IRA. Your contributions are not deductible, but your withdrawals are not taxable, like as I mentioned. So this is the best way for you guys to start investing money, if you have the money to invest. As long as you have earned income, if you've got a job, you can contribute up to $6,000 to a Roth IRA. And you can open an account at any of these brokerage houses. And it's just the way the account is coded as a Roth IRA. You can invest in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. You can invest in anything, cash, whatever. And so it's a really good investment vehicle for you. Here's the beauty of the Roth IRA that I didn't mention before. It's not like you're putting this money in and never going to have access to it until you're old. Let's say you start contributing to a Roth IRA, and then you think, oh, well, I need money for a hurricane deductible, or I need money for school or to buy a car or whatever. I need emergency money. You can take distributions out of this at any time without a penalty because you never got a tax deduction, you see. So your contributions that you put into a Roth IRA, you can take those out anytime you want without a penalty because they were not tax deferred. So that's what a lot of people don't realize. So just think of this Roth IRA, that can be your emergency fund, because if you really need the money, you can take it out. So your contributions can come out at any time without a penalty. Your earnings you have to have your earnings in there for 5 years. If you have your earnings in there for 5 years, you can take them out for certain reasons. Let's see, but to first-time home buyer, up to $10,000 down payment on a house, education expenses, threat of bankruptcy, and medical expenses. Are reasons to take out, approved reasons to take out your earnings from a Roth IRA. Any questions? Anybody? Anybody in here? Questions? Okay. Okay, then the last section in this chapter is the efficient market hypothesis. So what the efficient market hypothesis is saying is that the markets are efficient, meaning that you cannot consistently beat the market on a consistent basis. So in other words, you can't outperform the market. You can only earn the normal market returns. The reasons that the markets are efficient is because there's a lot of people in the market buying and selling. It's pretty cheap to be in the market. Transaction costs are small, and information is readily available. Here, the random walk is just stating that there's day-to-day price changes and that these changes typically are random. Okay, what I'm going to talk about here is market efficiency, this efficient market hypothesis. So there's 3 forms. Let's see if they're going to let me write on this. Yeah. Okay, so there's 3 forms of efficient market hypothesis. There's the weak form, the semi-strong form, and the strong form. So the weak form of the efficient market hypothesis states that all historical information is reflected in the stock price. All right, so let's, let me think of an example here. So let's say that, let's say a company had a really good report. Let's say that some really good news came out about a company. Let's say Boeing. The news came out that Boeing just got a bunch of new orders for, a couple weeks ago, the news came out that Boeing got several new orders for their, for new airplanes. And so you're thinking, well, yeah, I read that a few weeks ago that Boeing got some new orders. It's probably a good stock to buy, but the stock is going to go up, so I'm going to buy it. Well, what the weak form of market efficiency is saying is that all historical information is reflected in the stock price. So what that means is that you can't look at historical information and make judgments based on that, because the stock price has already changed. So you can't make abnormal profits. If the company announced in the past there was some bad information and the stock price has already dropped. So what we're saying here is that the markets are efficient in the weak form. The prices reflect all historical information. So it's not possible to game the system and make these abnormal profits by looking at past information. Okay, next, so the markets are efficient in this. So the efficient market hypothesis says that markets are efficient in the weak form. The semi-strong form is saying that all publicly available information, info is reflected in stock price. So the semi-strong form says that all publicly available information is reflected in the stock price, meaning if information comes out within seconds, the price changes. So we can't wait around for an announcement that the FDA is going to approve a drug and then run and buy that stock, because the price is going to reflect, the price will already be reflected. So you cannot make abnormal profits or game the system by buying and selling based on publicly available information. It should immediately be reflected. So let me ask you though, let's say that you had, let's say the information was coming out about a stock, either a good earnings report or, a good earnings report or a bad earnings report, or approval of FDA approval of a COVID drug or something. So you have the stock on your computer, you've got it pulled up, you have the order already, you've got your finger on the mouse, and you're going to either buy or sell, whether it's good or bad information. Do you think you could make money trying to do that? I wouldn't risk it. That my answer to that, it would be, I wouldn't risk it, because this is what happens a lot of times is immediately, like say it's good information, immediately after the good information, let's say it's a good earnings report, the stock jumps way up. And so, I mean, you might be able to get in on the beginning of this, but a lot of times it overshoots. So ideally what should happen is the stock should go up to where the new price is. If it's good news, the stock should immediately go up to the new price and then stay there. But a lot of times what happens is it goes way up and then comes down. There's an overreaction. So if you're buying right away, you could get caught in this overreaction. So what a lot of people will do is they have this 3-day rule. If it's good news or if it's bad news, they'll wait 3 days until the dust settles, and then they'll purchase or sell. And so anyway, the point I'm making here is that the market is efficient in the semi-strong form, because all publicly available information is going to be reflected pretty much immediately in the stock price. So you can't make these abnormal returns by relying on publicly available information. We're just going to make the normal returns like everybody else. All right, semi-strong form is saying that all private info is reflected. And by private, I mean insider info. Is reflected in the stock price. Right, so the strong form is saying that all private information or insider information is reflected in the stock price. The stock market is not efficient in the strong form. If you have insider information, of course you can make abnormal profits. If you have information that no one else has, you can make abnormal profits on that and game the system. And that's why insider trading is illegal. Because if we didn't think it was a fair playing field, and these people could, game the system, then we would stop investing, the market would crash. So this market efficiency, just to sum up, the markets are considered to be efficient in the weak form and the semi-strong form, but not in the strong form. Because if you do have insider information, you can make abnormal profits. Okay, I think that is it for this chapter. Okay, I forgot about this. So there are some anomalies though. So we're still talking about market efficiency. There are a few anomalies where researchers have found that it is possible to make abnormal profits. So they have found these anomalies where the markets don't appear to be efficient. And so these are just some of them. One is low PE stocks. That's if you think about a stock, if you think about stocks that have a low PE ratio, price to earnings. So think about the PE ratio. It's price per share divided by earnings per share. Okay. So if the price of a stock goes way down, then their PE ratio is going to, let's see, if the price of a stock goes down, then the PE ratio is going to go down. So the idea is that those could be value companies. This hasn't really panned out. That's the low PE stocks. The small firm effect is that small companies you can make more money if you buy small companies versus medium or large companies. They have found that effect kind of in the 1980s. They found it, but not. I mean, I don't think it's not substantial enough to be investing and to just be investing in small firms. The neglected firm effect, that's the idea that if a company is being badly run, it's a good company, but it's being badly run, it could be undervalued, and that could be a way to make abnormal returns. Now, this January effect thing is really interesting. This is the one more than any of the others that it appears that there seems to be some truth to that. That means what they're saying with the January effect is that the stock market almost always goes up in January. So, and it's the beginning of January. So if you're in the market, you should always be in the market in January. You can make money. And so that's kind of an inefficiency to know that, oh, the market always goes up in January and I can make money by being in the market. Here's why. Remember earlier in the chapter when I was talking about how you can minimize your capital losses, or excuse me, minimize your taxes on your capital gains by taking capital losses? Well, in December, a lot of people will do that. They'll sell stocks and then they start buying back stocks in January, the end of December. So some people don't do what I said and immediately buy something in the same industry. They'll sell their losers and then come January, they'll start buying stocks. So what happens when everybody starts buying stocks? Prices go up, right? Another thing that people do in January, large institutional investors and everyone in general, they're looking at their portfolios, they're rebalancing. Some things they're overweight in. Like for what I mean is if they've bought something that's gone up a lot, they might sell some of that and buy more of something else. So a lot of people are doing buying in early January, just allocating their money and so forth. And so so what's happened is a lot of people now they plan on this January effect. So it's happened earlier and earlier. It kind of generally happens like in the first 5 to 7 days of January. So anyway, of all of these anomalies right here, the January effect is the one that seems to have some actual evidence that it occurs. So that's what we mean by the January effect. And there's 2 reasons for that, because a lot of people have sold and taken their losses for tax reasons in December, and then they buy back in January. And then there's just a lot of large institutional investors who are reallocating their clients, repositioning their clients' investments, and just doing a lot of buying at the beginning of the year. Okay. There's also the day of the week effect. That's where I think that's the one where they don't buy on Mondays and Fridays, but you can make more money if you just buy Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Mixed evidence on that. The overreaction effect, if you think a company's if people are going to overreact on the positive and the negative side, that's another situation. And then prices can kind of drift. If stocks going up or stocks are going down, you can have this drift in these securities prices. Okay, so anyway, those are some anomalies that can, and the implication is that it makes the market less efficient. All right. Okay, so anyway, that's chapter 4. Let me go over chapter 5 real quickly here. There's not as much information in 5. Oops. It's not what I want. Okay, so chapter 5 deals with risk and portfolio management. So let's take a look at risk and return. So how do you make money in stocks? What are the 2 ways? Everyone on Zoom there, I hope you're not asleep. What are the 2 ways you make money in the stock market? Okay, well, we talked about capital. Go ahead.
Through like dividends, and if you sell that stock and get a profit off that stock.
Right. So if you sell a stock and make a profit, that's capital appreciation. If you get a dividend, that's income. So that's your return, your income, dividend income plus capital appreciation. So there's some differences among these returns. The realized return, that's what we actually get. The required return, that's the return that we require to be compensated for our risk. And the expected return is what we think is going to happen. So the expected return is what the analysts think the stock is going to return. The required return is what we need to have to be compensated for our risk. And we use this formula called the capital asset pricing model to get that return, to calculate that. And then the realized return is what actually happens. Okay, then there's two types of risk. There's diversifiable risk and non-diversifiable risk. Diversifiable risk is self-explanatory. That's risk that can be diversified away. Non-diversifiable risk is risk that you can't diversify. So what does that actually mean? Well, if diversifiable risk is risk that I can get rid of if I own a diversified portfolio. Okay, so if I own all different types, all different stocks in all different sectors, once I've owned about 25 stocks, at about 25 to 40 stocks, I've reduced my diversifiable risk down as low as it can go. So let's say that I own some ExxonMobil, I've got some Altria, some Enphase, some, I have some computer companies, I have technology, I have some pot stocks, I have some travel, materials, pharmaceuticals. I'm in all these different areas. I've diversified away my risk. As opposed to if I just had all my eggs in one basket, say ExxonMobil and Chevron. So that's the diversifiable risk. Non-diversifiable risk is the risk that is, it's in the system. It's called systematic risk. So that's like economic risk, the risk of COVID. Everything's going to go down if there's because of COVID. If the risk of us going into a recession, that's non-diversifiable. So you can't get rid of that. It's inherent in the economy. A terrorist attack, a war, so that you can't diversify away. So those are the two types of risk. Right. So, and then they're just giving you some other examples of non-diversifiable risk versus diversifiable risk here. Right. So, so here they're showing a portfolio of 4 stocks here. And let's see here. So you've got stock A, B, and C. And this is, okay, so this is just showing you that a portfolio is less variable than individual stocks. So here we have stock A, okay, we have stock B. So their correlation is somewhat negative, you see, because they're going in different directions. Then we have stock C. And so you see the volatility here of stock A, of holding stock A by itself, stock B by itself, and stock C by itself. If you combine these 3 stocks into a portfolio, you've diversified your risk, you see? And so instead of here, my returns varied from, well, this stock, the price went from $6 to $2, then back to $6. Here, the range is from what, about $3 to $8. Here, the range is from $4 to $6. In my portfolio here, my range is ranging, this is profits, I guess, is ranging from about $4.50 to $6. So I've diversified that risk away with this portfolio. And so I've reduced my risk. And that's what they're talking about here. Now in this graph, they're showing us this is your diversifiable risk or unsystematic risk. This is your non-diversifiable risk or systematic risk. This is the number of stocks that you hold. So look at this. Once you get to about 20 stocks, you're diversified. You've gotten rid of all that diversifiable risk or portfolio risk. You're just left with your non-diversifiable risk. So it's a good idea I mean, of course, if we could predict the future, we could buy the next stock that's going to be the next best thing that's going to go up. But we don't know that. So we have to diversify. So there's two ways to measure risk. Hopefully you remember this from Finance 302, the standard deviation and beta. So the standard deviation measures the variability around the returns. The higher the standard deviation, the greater the risk. And so let's say, for example, we have a stock that has a standard deviation. Let's say we have a stock that has a return of 20%, an average return of 20% with a standard deviation of 10%. That means that within one standard deviation, I can make 20% plus or minus 10%. If I had a stock that made another stock that made 20% with a standard deviation of 30%, that means I could make 20% plus or minus 30%. So obviously, the 30% standard deviation is much riskier. So the higher the standard deviation of a stock, the higher the variability, the greater the risk. That's one way to measure risk. If I bought a CD, a certificate of deposit, I would be guaranteed like 2%, no risk at all. No, the standard deviation would be 0. We don't really, I mean, that's one way to measure risk. In the real world, we don't really look at the standard deviation though. We look at something called beta. Now beta, what beta does is they run this regression analysis. They'll take individual stocks and they'll run a regression analysis using individual stocks against the market. The market has a beta of 1. So the riskiness in the market is 1. If your stock, it mimics the market, goes up and down the same as the market, identical, it's going to have a beta of 1. It's just as risky. If your stock goes up more when the market's up or down more when the market's down, it's going to have a higher beta. So a beta of 2 is just about basically twice as risky in the market. A beta of 0.5 is half as risky as the market. And so a stock that's less risky than the market is going to have a lower beta. Stock that's more risky than the market will have a higher beta. And so one way to diversify too is to look at these betas, because if you can get a stock that has a really low beta or even a negative beta, that gives you really good diversification benefits. Okay, this is showing the standard deviation. So here they're showing stock A and stock B. They both have the same return, but the standard deviation of B is much wider. The variability is much wider. So it's riskier. Stock B is much riskier than stock A. Right. All right, so let's look at the standard deviation for a portfolio. It depends on it depends on the correlation of your stocks, how risky the portfolio is. So for example, these two stocks, let's see here. Okay, so look at case 1 here. In case 1, what they're showing here is stock A and stock B. There's another thing that I haven't talked about yet called correlation. The correlation between two assets ranges from -1 to +1. Stocks that are completely negatively correlated, that move in opposite directions, have a correlation coefficient of -1. Stocks that move in unison are perfectly positively correlated. They have a correlation coefficient of +1. 0 means no correlation at all. So look at what happens if you invest in two stocks that are perfectly positively correlated. So let's say that this is ExxonMobil and Chevron. Theoretically, let's just say they're perfectly positively correlated. You have no diversification, right? They move identical. So investing in these two stocks gives you no diversification benefit at all. You haven't reduced your risk at all. Look at case 2. Perfectly negatively correlated. This is what you want to achieve. Stock A, look, these are the returns for stock A. These are the returns for stock B, perfectly negative. So if you bought these two stocks, you've reduced your risk and you're guaranteed to make this return. You've reduced your risk totally. But that's not the real world. Usually you have something like this. You've got you try to get a low correlation. And so having these two stocks gives you a somewhat lower correlation, and you've reduced your risk somewhat by having this portfolio of these two stocks. So in case one, there's no reduction in your risk, no impact on the standard deviation. Case two, they're exactly offset. So you've got your standard deviation becomes 0. You've reduced your risk totally. This is the more realistic situation. In case three, the variability is reduced. You have a somewhat smaller standard deviation, but you still have some risk, but it's lowered. All right, these are just showing some actual returns of mobile, and that's Pacific Gas. So we can skip that. Okay, so you can skip the indifference curves, but let me go back to portfolio theory here. So what they're saying here is that what you can do is you can plot, here they're plotting the returns for mobile in this company. So if you take any companies and you run this plot, this is just basically showing that the higher risk you're taking, the higher the returns are going to be. And then you have this efficient frontier here. So what this is saying that if a stock is efficient, if the returns are efficient for the risk, you're on this frontier. In other words, you're getting the right amount of return for the risk on the line. If you're up here, it's not attainable because the returns are too high for the risk. Here, it's inefficient because you're not making enough of a return for your risk. So in the shaded area is inefficient. Along the line is the efficient situation. And then up here, it's unattainable. You can skip the indifference curves. Okay, and let's see. Okay, I really need to go over the capital asset pricing model, but we're running out of time. So let me, I want to look at the homework real quick to see if there's problems in there. So give me a second. And let me look at the homework. Oh, I need to share the screen again and get into Moodle to see the homework assignment. Just give me a second. All right, so chapter 4 is fine. Okay, chapter 5. I want to look at the problems real quick before you go for chapter 5. Okay, so it's problems 1 through 3, 5, and 6. Okay, there's a bunch of math problems there. So I'm going to change the assignment since I ran out of time. Just only chapter 4 is going to be due next Monday. And what I'll do is we'll go over chapter 5 so in more detail next Monday, and because we will have time for that. And what I'll probably do is have the assignment due like the Friday after or something, And then I'll post the solutions so you can study those before the exam. So I'm going to change the due date for chapter 5 since we didn't get to finish. So next Monday, only chapter 4 is due. Okay. And then next Monday, we'll finish chapter 5. And then I promise we'll have time next Monday to go over how to input your stocks in your portfolio in Yahoo for the contest. Okay. So I'll see you all here in class next week. Just chapter 4 is due. Does any of you have any questions? Okay, have a good rest of the week, and I'll see you all next week. Take care.